Segregation in education was a very real and troubling reality. So how did we get to a point where schools were segregated? To find the answers, we need to first look at the 14th Amendment and more specifically the Equal Protection Clause. We also have to visit a landmark court case that didn't deal directly with education, but would have a huge impact on the educational system as a whole. The 14th Amendment of the Constitution is a Reconstruction Amendment. In its Equal Protection Clause, it states that no state can deprive a person of life, liberty, or property without the due process of law. It also states that no state can deny a person equal protection of the laws. This seems very straightforward, but the landmark case, Plessy v. Ferguson, would change how the clause was legally interpreted. Plessy v. Ferguson was a landmark court case in 1896. Plessy boarded a car that was designated for the use by white patrons only, as mandated by state laws. The railroad company had already been informed of Plessy's racial lineage, and after Plessy had taken a seat in the white-only railroad car, he was asked to vacate it and sit in the blacks-only car. Plessy refused and was arrested immediately. Plessy planned to use the Equal Protection Clause in his defense in court. But during the ruling, the court ruled that the 14th Amendment only implied political, not social equality, and said it could have segregated facilities as long as they were separate but equal. What came out of Plessy v. Ferguson was the separate but equal doctrine. Facilities and public accommodations were allowed to be separated by race, on the condition that the quality of each group's public facilities was to remain equal. This included educational facilities. The problem was that these facilities were not equal, and a lot of the times there were very big differences between the facilities. In Brown v. Board of Education, the plaintiffs were 13 Topeka parents on behalf of their 20 children. The suit called for the school district to reverse its policy of racial segregation. The Topeka Board of Education operated separate elementary schools under an 1879 Kansas law. One of the plaintiffs, Oliver Brown's daughter Linda, a third grader, had to walk 6 blocks through a construction site to her school bus stop just to ride another mile to her segregated black school, while the Sumner Elementary School, a white school, was just 7 blocks from her house. She was denied admission to this school, and that's when the lawsuit was filed. The decision ended up being that the court ruled that the state laws establishing separate public schools for black and white students was unconstitutional. The decision overturned the Plessy v. Ferguson decision of 1896, which allowed state-sponsored segregation, as it was found that these schools were not equal at all. No segregation laws were passed in Michigan after the Civil War. In 1871, it barred school segregation and prohibited separate schools or departments based on race or color. In 1948, everyone was entitled to full and equal access to public accommodations, including public education, institutions, transportation, and recreation. This is the educational segregation in the United States prior to Brown v. Board of Education.